cybersecurity people are very, very skeptical, easily spooked. They don't divulge information, obviously, because that's their job, to keep information safe. People are not reading as much as they used to. They don't really read anymore. If you're an entrepreneur or if you're a company that's opening a new line of business, there's some questions that you need to answer before you go to market. And AI can help you do a lot of that competitive research and a lot of that market research.
A lot of podcast content has been scripted or seems pretty close to what we call AI slop, right? There's a lot of it out there that's just pro forma.
People think that they can use AI to fix everything, the ums and the uhs and the sound quality, but AI right now, the way it is, will create more work for you. If you're thirsty for content, do a podcast. I'm telling you, a podcast is the best kept secret.
Hello and welcome to BetterTech. This is Jocelyn Houle. I'm super excited to welcome Josh Bruyning to the show today from Bruyning Media. Is that right?
That's right. Thanks, Jocelyn.
It's great to meet you. Give us a little quick idea of what Bruyning Media is and how you came to found that company.
Bruyning Media is a B2B marketing firm that specializes in helping tech companies build thought leadership with podcasts. And I kind of fell into it by accident. It wasn't so much that I found it, it found me. I was in sales and marketing, working as an enterprise executive for an enterprise account executive for a small cybersecurity SaaS company. And I did that for a number of years. Before that, I was in cybersecurity. So I went from the technical side into the sales and marketing side, looking for a new, move to New York. And I was kind of like looking for that new chapter in my life last year. And out of the blue, someone called me, and it was one of my old coworkers. And she said, I'm working with this data company. It's a SaaS company. We do data for CRE, commercial real estate. And could you help us produce our podcast? Because I'm spending about 40 hours a month doing this. It's not what I was hired for, but we are transitioning into podcasts. Maybe they saw what podcasts were doing for politicians and what it did for, Trump in the election. Whether, whatever, regardless of your leaning, we can all admit that podcasts did a lot to help a number of politicians get elected. And so the tech industry was also following suit. And so she asked for my help. And I said, after going through this whole thing with her and really understanding what they wanted to do, I thought, why don't I just do it for you? It looks like what you really need is a fractional team. You need someone to come in and who has the expertise, who can reduce your time, the amount of time that you're spending. And I said, I can get you down from 40 hours a month on this to 2 hours a month. And that's what we did. So we did a pilot and they loved it. It saved them a ton of money. It saved them a lot of time, and the quality of their podcasts went up. And then out of that, we got blogs, they got white papers, they got a ton of social media content, video clips, audio clips, and they found that it was a really good way to connect with their existing customers, their clients, their partners. And it was also giving a lot of content to act as a leave behind for their sales team. And so their sales team was able to leverage that content. And I went, wow, I think we're onto something here. I think that this is the future of technology. And since I am an old tech guy, I figured, well, I can pass the savings on to my customers or any future customers by leveraging technology and especially AI. And so that's how we got started. It was very simple, and I started adding to the team, and word kind of spread. And I found that this was just coming from the sales world. I was like, this is a dream come true, because it sort of sells itself. When you approach a company and you say, how can I 10x your leads? How can I support your sales team, support your marketing team for the fraction of the cost, especially companies that are looking to add, 2-3 digital marketers onto their team? It saves them probably, on average, I save my customers maybe, $240,000 a year.
Well, let's break this down a little bit. I want to help our listeners, are like a business and technology audience. Tell me how much are businesses using podcasts, and what kind of podcasts? How should we think about the podcast world? We were just briefly before we started press record, we were saying that there's short ones, there's long ones, there's long form editorial. Like, how should we think about the world of podcasts in the B2B and business world?
In the B2B world, it's very simple. A podcast is a way to humanize and to connect at a human level with your partners, your clients, and your customers. That's the value, right?
Mm-hmm.
When people normally think about podcasts, they think about monetizing through sponsorships, and that's geared towards the majority of the world. So if you're creating an entertaining podcast, think of the NPRs, something like Radiolab. They'll have more opportunity to have sponsorships and other ways of monetizing because they're reaching a really wide audience.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, companies are looking to establish thought leadership, brand awareness, and to connect with others. And so instead of monetizing directly, they found that it's a really good way to kind of add a human touch, whether it's the founder or the CEO, onboard experts who are talking about a given subject. People are starting to tune in, specifically C-suite executives are starting to tune in to really understand what their industry is about, to understand who the key players are, to get their insights. And we're finding that podcasts are becoming a differentiator. And pretty soon, it's going to be the cost of doing business. Everyone's going to need to establish thought leadership, and podcasts are really the best way to do that.
So, that's really interesting. I've been doing podcasting for about 4 years. I started in like long form editorial. Now there's like a lot of gray area, I would say. Like a lot of individual companies want to do podcasts that honestly are relatively promotional. Others are interested in doing more thought leadership. How are you advising customers to kind of walk that line? Because you're an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, and I will tell you, they want to talk about their thing.
Yes. Never talk about your thing. And I know I'm talking about my thing right now, but really, never talk about your thing. That's not the goal. The goal really is to take all of that knowledge that you have in-house. I'll give you an example of the CRE Weekly Digest. They're a company. We produce their podcast, and they represent a company called Lightbox, which is a commercial real estate data company. And they've got all this knowledge and expertise locked in a box. They have professors that work there. They have people who have been in the CRE market for 30, 40 years. And so what do you do with all that knowledge? You can write blogs, you can write white papers and all that stuff, but people don't really read anymore. Right? Video clips.
Say it one more time. I think it's really important for everyone to understand that.
Oh, yeah. People are not reading as much as they used to. They don't really read anymore.
I wish it was different, but that is really true. I love it, but everyone's getting hit so hard with so many blogs, so much reading. I just feel like
consume it all.
Yeah, it's too difficult. It's too difficult. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
It is worth mentioning a couple of times. It's not 2004 anymore. Blogs are derivative at best right now.
But the flip side that's very interesting, it really caught my attention. All the marketing teams I work with, they're dying for content. And so what you're saying is that these podcasts can be reused. And
yes.
Talk a little bit about that, because I just know so many VPs of marketing who are very thirsty for content.
Yes. If you're thirsty for content, do a podcast. I'm telling you, a podcast is the best kept secret. The reason I started doing podcasts is because I was trying to reach the cybersecurity clientele that I was after, right? And this is why talking about your stuff doesn't work, because they don't really care about your stuff. They don't care about the technology. What they care about is community and trust, right?
I wish they did care about the technology more, but you're right. I know you're right.
They do not care because they're inundated with ads, and and I don't know about other industries, but in cybersecurity, for GRC alone, which is governance, risk, and compliance, you've got about 400 companies.
And they're naturally very skeptical. They don't believe anything anyway.
Exactly. Cybersecurity people are very, very skeptical, easily spooked. They don't divulge information, obviously, because that's their job, to keep information safe. And so I wanted to become a part of that community and to really listen. And so I thought, even if you have good intentions, you reach out to a C-suite person, in this case, the CISO or the CTO or the CIO. You can't even get past the initial skepticism. So what do I give to them in order to get 30 minutes of picking their brains? Well, I can give them some positive exposure. And so I don't have to talk about my thing at all. all I have to do is listen. And through that, I became a part of the community. I met so many wonderful people. I became a part of an honorary cybersecurity guy. And my background in cybersecurity did help. But,
Right.
But really coming into it as an agent of just being able to listen and to connect people. And so our mission has always been to connect, promote, and grow. And that's what we've done is we help people just connect each other to each other.
Mm-hmm.
But to get the other content, so I'm going to talk about like why podcasts are so powerful. To do a podcast, number one, you need to answer some fundamental questions. What is our marketing message? Because if I have a podcast that has no direction, it's not going to go anywhere. So I need to know what our podcast is about. What's in a name? What's the name of the podcast? It must reflect my marketing strategy. What are the guests that I would have on board? Would these be my customers? If I'm an MSP, maybe I'd want to leverage the existing customers.
MSP means
managed service providers.
Yep.
So maybe I would want to have my current customers involved in the podcast, because what we're trying to do is to not gain brand awareness. Maybe we're large enough to where now we just want to reinforce our relationship with our existing customers. So now I have to ask myself, where are we in our marketing strategy?
Okay. So what's the message? Who do we want to have on the show, and who do we want listening in?
Right. What is our goal? Is it top of funnel? Are we trying to support the sales team? Are we trying to just gain brand awareness? Are we trying to gain stickiness? So you ask all of these questions, and what you have is now a clean and clear funnel and repository of data and information that you can then repurpose into other pieces of content. So if you've got a title, you've got the show, let's take BetterTech, for example, right? I know you're all about BetterTech. Okay. And so if you're you're probably not going to be reaching the public, the general public. You're probably going to be reaching C-suite executives, or at least sophisticated listeners. And so out of that, you can get the podcast, you can create video clips, which are easily digestible. You can get blogs out of that. You can create a white paper out of a series of podcasts.
That's right.
On a particular topic. If you wanted to create a book, if you wanted to make a book out of your podcast, you can say, for the next 10 months, we're going to focus on this specific topic because this is what we're trying to target in the market. This is what the sales team is going after. This is where the company wants to position itself and how it wants to position itself. So what we want is, at the end of the year, we want something to support all of the efforts that we're doing. So we may want to produce a book. We may want a lead magnet on our website. So you take that podcast, you repurpose it into something that is valuable, that would drive traffic to your website so that you can, provide something for your potential product.
This is it is a very different perspective. I do think a lot of people get in the podcast game, right? Because they're thinking of it in the traditional sponsored media fashion, and like for you to recast it as a lead gen and content generation is, I think, really powerful. A lot of the prep materials that I looked at with you, you talk about I want to get into like the little bit more of the how-to, because, it's easy to talk about and hard to do. But you talk a lot about authenticity and finding, being clear about your message. These things, again, are kind of easy to say and hard to do. I'm thinking of some executives I've worked with, who just want to sort of bully pulpit to meet interesting tech execs. I do think that there's a pretty high bar for authenticity. So like, what do you see as like biggest mistakes or biggest, must-dos when it comes to staying authentic in this work?
Well, people try to be authentic. I think that's the first mistake. If you try to be authentic, it
gets weird.
Yeah, because you have to try. I'm going to put it this way. So, if you're dating and you know that girl likes that shirt, you're going to say, yeah, this is the kind of shirt that I like. And you're going to try to own it, but she's going to see right through it. She's going to say, that doesn't really fit you. I can tell that you're not comfortable in that shirt. People will see through not when you're trying to be authentic. I think that the second mistake people make is, by being authentic, the first thing they say is, authentic to whom? And then they start researching their audience. So if my audience is, if I'm a white guy and my audience is, I'm trying to sell to, urban folks, and I want to show up as my authentic self, I'm not going to go in blasting, maybe like polka or something. I'm going to say, well,
I can only say I have teenagers and it's the same
yeah,
problem. You can't fake
yes,
it. They will see. They'll take you apart.
great example. Okay, so let's run with that. That's perfect metaphor, Jocelyn.
Teens will not put up with it for a second. Just
Right.
be your same self.
Yes, imagine parents trying to be authentic with their kids. Your authentic self to your kid is not the most pleasant side of yourself, at least to your kid. So sometimes being authentic, maybe that's the third thing that you need to know about authenticity. It comes with risk, because when you're your authentic self, you can think of this in terms of product market fit, which again, we can go really into that, but that's a huge part of this discussion, this topic. Who you are will fit someone or some audience. So no longer, gone are the days of build it and they will come. The day is here where you have to show up, be brave, go out and say what you really want to say, and see who listens. Maybe you'll have 5 listeners. Okay? That is your base. And you find out what is it that you said that added value and resonated with them. And so now, as you're being your authentic self, you can carve out the parts of yourself that don't resonate, but what's left is truly you.
So the distill is still there. Yeah, that makes sense. So let's talk a little bit about just step by step. It's interesting when you said, hey, figure out what your marketing message is. I'm going to just presuppose a lot of companies, once you sit down with them, they're like, oh, we thought we knew, but we didn't. This kind of process really probably makes people define it much more. So, okay, let's say I sort of know what I want to do and why. Step by step, kind of walk me through it. Let's assume I'm just like your example used. I'm just, I'm a VP of marketing at a small tech firm. We just have like an office in San Jose. Yep. What do I do?
I'll give you the example of Cybernomics, which is a podcast that it's kind of our flagship podcast. It's fairly young. We're about 37 episodes in. And I had to ask all these questions. I had to say, okay, the first name of Cybernomics was Security Market Watch. I knew that I wanted to do something in cybersecurity. I wanted to connect with that community, but I have to offer something of value, which is an analysis of the market, because there's so many vendors that C-suite executives find it very difficult to make buying decisions. So how do I talk to the innovators and deliver that information in a non-intrusive way to help C-suite people make better market decisions? Then I thought Security Market Watch was too long of a name. It wasn't catchy. So whenever you type Security Market Watch, security things come up, market things come up, watch things come up. So I pivoted to, cyber and economics. Cybernomics. All right, great. Am I going to focus only on cybersecurity, or will I focus on everything cyber? Well, I had a discussion with a marketing VP, and she said, focusing on one vertical is probably going to be best for you, because you can have one page on your website that leads everyone in the cybersecurity market to this podcast. If you approach a cybersecurity CMO or VP of marketing, director of marketing, they will ask, what do you know about me? What do you know about my industry? And how do you help me connect with others? And so we said, okay, we're going to focus on cybersecurity. We will focus on our core mission of connecting, promoting, and growing. And we're going to focus on the innovations in cybersecurity and talk about what is the value, finding the hidden costs in cybersecurity to help those customers or those, the community make better decisions. And so in doing that, we had to focus on our industry that we know the best, which is tech. We had to focus on a vertical, which is cybersecurity. We had to come up with a name that's easily searchable. And we have to invite guests who are our ideal people would listen to, our ideal market.
How'd you get guests? That's a question I have. How'd you get guests? And how many did you pre-record before you launched?
I think we pre-recorded maybe 4 or 5 before we launched. I always advise to record maybe 4 or 5 in the hopper.
I agree. I think it's better. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And things are moving so fast. It's really hard to keep up and have a lot in the hopper, but especially when you're starting out, it's good. So I find guests, honestly, finding guests is not really difficult when you're in the community.
Mm-hmm.
And right now it's word of mouth. Usually at the end of every episode, I just say, hey, thanks for being on the show. If you know anybody who would want to come on and who has something to say about the hidden costs of cybersecurity, I'd love to talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
I reach out to them. But the key thing here is to approach them with something of value. And that is the key component of podcasting, is how do I reach out to someone and how do I offer someone something of value?
Mm-hmm.
So if I ask a CISO on my show, I will blast them out. I will put them out there. I will promote the crap out of them.
Do you have some metrics that go with that so that they get a sense of what that means?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. So one of the metrics that, this is kind of unconventional. I don't look at listeners. I don't look at downloads. They're irrelevant to me because what I'm looking for is engagement. I want to see how many comments people are leaving on a social media post.
Okay.
I want to interact with them. And so when I look at, let's say, a LinkedIn post, I'm not looking to see how many likes I have because that's going to make you depressed, right? Even the most popular people, sometimes they'll post something that you get 30,000 followers, you'll get 5 likes sometimes.
Right.
But typically, people will start to interact, especially if I have like a founder on the show. Their group, their community wants to hear from them. And so like I did a podcast with the CEO at Command Zero, and we threw that up on LinkedIn. We got like 200 likes. But you had all of these C-suite executives going, oh yeah, we love this product. We love these guys. We hear about these guys all the time. Like, good for you. And what they discovered was they were really well liked in the industry. And I reached out to a bunch of those people and I say, hey, I have a personal relationship with the folks over at Command Zero. Would you like an introduction? I'm not getting anything out of it, but I'm connecting a buyer to a vendor.
Right.
And that's delivering value on both sides because it's already pre-vetted on both sides. So the executive isn't spooked. The vendor is getting a warm lead. Everybody wins, right? So now I have this engine of connecting people, and it's directly tied to revenue for the guests on my show. So then when I approach a CMO in cybersecurity, I could say, here's the engagement level, here's what you can do, and here's what I've been able to do and the value I've been able to add to these other companies. And they were just a one-time guest. Imagine what we can do for you if we were to produce an entire series and have you host it, or we would host it in some cases.
Yeah, how's that work?
Your in-house expertise.
Out of curiosity, what if I engage with engaging with a service like well, I guess let me ask this a little bit differently. You said earlier, like, oh, this woman's like, it's taking her 40 hours, right?
Yeah.
What do you think most people don't know about? I think most people are like, hey, I put out, I can record myself on YouTube. I have a podcast ready to go. What do most people not know or not take into consideration for this use case where you're putting it out as part of your business?
Once you start, you can't stop.
Okay. Got to keep going. What about like the quality of the production values?
People think that they can use AI to fix everything, the ums and the uhs and the sound quality, but AI right now, the way it is, will create more work for you. So you have to do everything manually by hand. And for every 1 hour you record, you're probably using 3 to 6 hours editing, because let's face it, the people who are the experts in these companies are not podcasters. They're not radio people. Oftentimes, they're not even great communicators. And so you also have to be a good editor. I always say, and it's I think this is a Stephen King quote, or at least I read it in one of his books. Maybe he was quoting somebody else, but he said, to write is human, to edit is divine. And I apply it to podcasting. To podcast is human, to edit is divine.
That's right. I like that. What do you think just right now? There's a lot of tech available in the podcasting world. There's a lot of sort of trends like anything else. I'll give you an example. One trend I've seen is that when you do a podcast now, you have an ancillary YouTube as well. There's video as well, which hasn't always been the case.
Mhm.
What are like a few, as an insider, somebody who really sits on top of this trend,
Mhm.
like what's new in podcasting? What are some things to think about?
I think the art of the conversation, and this has nothing to do with technology. This is just getting back to the basics of what podcasting is about. I think people need to understand that podcasting is about being in a room talking to an individual. It's an intimate setting, and it is all about the conversation. So the more effort you put into building a conversation, telling a story, being a good conversationalist, a good listener, something that I'm always working on. I'm a serial yapper, I've been told, as you might have already learned in the last half hour. It's the art of the conversation, and whether your quality is good or it's bad, I have found that if you have good conversations with the right people, the listeners are forgiving. Production value is not everything. It all really comes back to being human and connecting with others.
Honestly, I mean, it sounds a little bit like mom and apple pie, what you're saying, but I do want to underscore. I think that's very interesting. A lot of podcast content has been scripted or seems very um, pretty close to what we call AI slop, right? There's a lot
Mhm.
of it out there
Yeah.
that's just pro forma. Okay, I'm going to ask you about your business, and then I'm going to tell you that's great. And, it
Mhm.
kind of goes through a certain pattern. And I do agree it has to be a real conversation. And
Yeah.
so there is a two-way value between the host and the interviewee
Yeah.
that sometimes is getting overlooked.
Yes. Yes. And by the way, can you hear my radiator? All of a sudden, it
I
decided to
can't.
turn on.
I can't.
Good. All right. So let's just say that technology is really good, and we're gonna give a
It's
shout out
so
to
good.
Riverside at blocking out background noise. That's the first. Okay, if you want to talk about just the tech,
Yeah. What's one
that's the
tech?
best
I'm going to
part.
put you on the spot. If you had
Yes,
to buy one high tech thing, what would it be?
Riverside. Okay. Well, actually, let me take it
Oh,
back. If I had to buy one high tech thing, it would be a good microphone.
mm-hmm.
That's the one thing,
Agree.
because let's talk about it. Like, if you're a filmmaker, you want a good camera. Without the camera, guess what? You're blind. Podcasting, get a good microphone. Don't skimp. Do not use your built-in microphone in your computer. That's always crap. It's better to use AirPods or some sort of in-ear thing with a mic than the built-in microphone in your laptop.
That's a good
That
one.
said, they've gotten really good at getting rid of background noise and making it sound like we're in the same room together.
I know the tech is amazing. I completely agree, though. It's an audio format, so
Yeah.
microphones matter.
Yeah. Microphones matter. Yeah. Who knew?
So when we talk a little bit, I want to make sure we talked about the things that you wanted to talk about coming in here. And I think it is really interesting that this kind of new idea of podcasts. Podcasts are the new blogs, right? Like, or new newsletter, right? And
Yeah.
you can use those not just to build your expertise and awareness and maybe even co-sell with partners, but you can use it then to create more content and a broader footprint. That's all amazing. We talked a little bit about making it authentic. It can't just be slop. And and we talked a little bit about the process, right? You sort of get started, do some recordings, work with you, I guess, to get it onto the proper platforms. Like, how do people find out about your podcast?
Honestly, just search for Cybernomics and
Yeah, but in general, like if I was to engage with you and like, hey, we're going to do, Jocelyn Co podcast, and then we record 4 or 5.
Oh.
Like, how do I promote that or get people to listen or engage, as you said, with the podcast?
That's a really good question. I think pick a platform that suits the content. Don't juggle a lot of. I know everybody wants to be on like YouTube and then LinkedIn and then Instagram and then TikTok. Pick a platform that suits your audience. For us, it's LinkedIn, because that's honestly, I'm on LinkedIn way more than I'm on TikTok or Instagram.
Yeah, I agree. That's right.
And being consistent. Consistency is key, and making sure that you're growing your community, and again, adding value and giving more than you get. That's the key to it, really, is to I know, and just trust that process, and over time you'll grow.
You can't have any podcast interview without talking about AI. It's a rule now.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on in the AI space. We just talked a little bit about post-production audio, which used to be like a very complex, expensive process, and now I think is just built into my microphone. When you do think about this AI world, there is a lot of AI slop out there. There's a lot of new, interesting tools that can create a podcast for you. What do you see as the kind of advantages or maybe like red flag, green flag when you think about all the new tech that's coming out?
The key to AI is working with it, not trusting it completely. Actually, we're just launching today. We launched our first episode of a podcast called the AI Startup Lab, and this is a collaboration between Bruyning Media and Compliance Aid, which is a company that was built 75% by AI. And so we're helping AI entrepreneurs build businesses literally from the ground up using AI. Why did I say that? Again, it's not what you might think. I think that working with AI to build a podcast, I don't think the value is in the using it to build the podcast itself. The value is in market research and using and working with it, not trusting it, but asking it questions to help you refine your content, to find your niche, to find your audience, and to deliver to them the insights that they need, whether it be trends, researching, what is new in AI in entrepreneurship, because things are moving so fast. The AI can read the internet and scour the internet much faster than I can. It can web scrape much faster than I can. It can put together a strategy or an outline much faster than I can. And it can keep me in line sometimes much better than I can. So does that answer your question? I mean,
Yeah.
I think when it comes to AI, I think really we have to think not conventionally, not using it to take over all of our tasks in terms of like making the things sound good. How do we think of ourselves as consultants building a service for people who will get value from that service? And so I think AI is instrumental in that, and it's not just podcasts, but in all of business. And if you're an entrepreneur or if you're a company that's opening a new line of business, there's some questions that you need to answer before you go to market. And AI can help you do a lot of that competitive research and a lot of that market research.
Yeah, I think specifically I was thinking about LM Notebook that did the podcast. So I was just curious if you had any comments on that. I've listened to it and messed around with it myself. I have my own comments. But what was your opinion of that, and where do you think that's going to go?
I think it's so cool, but it's not there yet.
Mm-hmm.
I've used it a bunch of times, and I have to edit. I was like, okay, I'm going to start a podcast series just using these two robots talking to each other. And what I learned, a couple of things I learned. One, they say a lot without saying much. Whereas the art of the conversation is about saying a lot by saying a little. They're saying a little by saying a lot. And it was
What do you mean?
Well, they'll kind of go back and let's say the subject is like French fries. They'll go, yeah, well, you guess what? French fries are back in style, and you really have to think about French fries and the saltiness of it, and so they'll kind of they don't
just
really
saying the obvious.
Yeah, there's an obvious, and there's no direction. They're just kind of saying a lot, very nicely and eloquently, but at the end of it, I'm just kind of like, all right, that sounded good, but it's not how I would have done it. Technically, also, it's flawed. They hallucinate a lot, so every few words, once in a while, you'll hear somebody like scream in the background or say something really wonky. They ad-lib a lot, and I think this is to add a human feel.
Yeah.
But sometimes the ad-libbing is just too much and too distracting.
Just gets weird.
Yeah, it gets weird. Yes, that's the perfect way to put it. It gets weird. So I think it's good, but I don't think it's there yet.
I don't disagree. Although I was surprised how drawn in I was by just the patter of two people, the NPR chit chat. Like I really got sucked in. That is very appealing.
Well, that's by design. I think that NPR is really good at that. It's a really good point. I once listened to 5 or 6 hours of Radio Lab, and I can't tell you a single thing that they talked about.
It's just engaging. Yeah, it's just fun. Yeah. So we are getting to the part of our interview where we're going to ask you some rapid fire questions.
Yes.
And these can be generally around podcast, leadership, business, just catch all. One question is, what's like a habit or routine that you personally keep that's been great for you professionally?
I talk to a lot of people all the time.
Okay. Were you always this way, or did you learn that?
Yeah, the trick is to get me to shut up. I'm like Donkey from Shrek. But I talk to everybody about everything all the time.
And what do you, I'm actually kind of curious about this. I've been talking about this with my son because he's a lone wolf.
Mhm.
And what do you think are like, sometimes you talk to people and you really don't, they tell you what you already knew. So
Mhm.
why do it?
For me, it's a skill. I think that conversation is a skill. And like you said, a lot of the kids are kind of lone wolves today. And I think it's a skill and an art that's being lost. But the art of the conversation is something that I want to keep alive, not just for myself, but also for the world. And I can, maybe I can pass it on to my kids.
What do you think is like an underrated leadership quality?
I want to say empathy, but everybody says empathy.
Yeah, don't say that.
Yeah.
Mostly because I don't have any.
Yeah, me neither. I'm working on it. I think decisiveness, being able to just make a decision, stick to it. It may be wrong later, but I think it's better to make a wrong decision with conviction than to spend 20 years trying to make, not making a decision at all. Fortune indeed favors the bold.
And what is like, just for you, a tech leader or somebody you kind of look up to who you think is like really gets it? Who do you most admire in that tech world right now?
Are we talking about Silicon Valley people, or could I mention
You
anyone?
pick anyone.
I'm going to say my buddy Randy Blasik. Shout out to Randy.
Okay.
Because Randy is a die-hard AI bro, and we've been just geeking out over what's happening in the generative AI space over the last couple weeks. And there's nobody that I know who's as plugged into this thing as he is. And he's walking the walk, which for me is to build a business using AI. And he is going to be one of those people that makes, I think he's going to make a billion-dollar company just using AI agents. He's got 16 agents on his team. They all have names. There are only 2 humans in his entire company, but it's valued the same as other companies of that size in cybersecurity. And so I'm mostly interested in AI entrepreneurship, and he's like the guru and my go-to for everything.
Nice. What would you say is a product or an app or something that you've seen recently that you would really recommend that you think is great?
Don't hate me, but DeepSeek. DeepSeek is crazy good. I think that after it was released, maybe Sam Altman had some conversations with his board and they stepped up ChatGPT. But DeepSeek, in my opinion, it's free. It's easily accessible by anyone, and it's incredibly robust. That said, when O3 comes out for ChatGPT, it's game over.
Yeah. I don't disagree. It's an exciting time to be in tech. What's a piece of advice, what's the best piece of business advice you've ever gotten?
Listen to yourself and trust your business instincts.
Okay.
I wish that I had known that a long time ago. I listened to Gartner. I was with that company, we paid Gartner $50,000 a year to give us some advice. And yeah, you don't want to have to blame people when things go wrong. As a leader, you have to own up, you have to make decisions and trust your business instincts. And yeah, other people can't tell you how to run your business. So
of course, I typically have end this by asking if you can recommend a book or some source of like a newsletter or something like that, which I certainly want to hear. But, of course we want to hear if there's a podcast that you think is exceptionally good.
Book, I would say The Go-Giver. It's one of those books I have on hand and I give them away. It's really, if you read The Go-Giver, then you'll understand where I'm coming from. It's my entire philosophy of giving. And I would, what was the second part of your question?
Is there a podcast that you think is exemplary that you personally think is great?
Cybernomics. No.
Yes.
No. I've been
just out there in the wild.
Well, this is sort of. I'm going to point to it in a different way. Freakonomics was the original podcast that I got into. I got into Freakonomics maybe, was it 10, 15 years ago? Stephen Levitt and Stephen Dubner. And they inspired me not just to get into podcasting, but into economics. Like they kind of really launched my interest in business and incentives and why people do what they do. And and I still listen to Freakonomics regularly.
All right, terrific. Well, It's really been great chatting with you today, Josh. Really appreciate it. And you shed a lot of light on some new ways to use podcasts very effectively in business. Thank you so much.
Yes, the pleasure is mine, Jocelyn. If you want to find more about Bruyning Media, Bruyning, you can go to bruyning.com. And you can also hit me up on LinkedIn. I love to connect with people on LinkedIn. I love to talk. And I really appreciate you inviting me on your podcast.
All right. Thanks so much. We'll see you soon.